Hi. Is your senior parent living alone? Well, they're not the only ones. 29% of U.S. citizens who are seniors live alone, the majority of them being women. But should they be living alone? Not all of them should. So today we're going to talk about 10 signs that may indicate to let you know that your senior parent should probably not be living alone at home any longer. So I'm going to be using my notes here, so forgive the rawness of the video. There's a lot going on here today. All right, number one, your parent is falling frequently. Your parent is not always going to be very truthful with you about telling you that they're falling. So you're going to have to look for signs like bruises and cuts, or maybe things are being left on the floor, how they walk, how they move. Should they be using a cane or a walker, but they're refusing to? Chances are that they probably are losing their balance. If they haven't completely fallen down, they may be on the verge of falling down and catch themselves. But eventually that will give way and they will end up hurting themselves and falling. So what do you do about that? They have to get a physical assessment by a physician and a physical therapist who can assess their gait to see if they need an assistive device. Hopefully, they will use that assistive device to prevent falls. I would also recommend an occupational therapist to come in and do a home assessment just to modify the home in any way to make it easier to avoid falling. You know, things like if the place is cluttered with a lot of furniture, to move some of that furniture to possibly accommodate an assistive device, to make sure there's enough lighting, to move things that may cause someone to trip, like wires or throw rugs, anything like that. Also, I would recommend to get some some fall detection devices, things like Great Call, My Notify, Alert One, Wallabot, and even the Apple Watch has a fall detection device built into it that can then let you know that your parent has fallen. You can also use video like the Echo Show. The only problem with video monitoring is that it means that you have to sit there and look at the video all the time. So of course you have your own life, you have work, you have things to do. You may not get to that video for 8 hours. So I would say that that's a good thing to have, the video monitoring, if your parent is fine with that. But fall detection devices will work faster and better for you and your parent. But number two, why your parents shouldn't be living alone or may not, is if they've become a bit of a hermit. And it's very important as we grow older to be socially engaged for the great majority of people. The less engaged you are, the more depressed and anxious you become. And ironically, one of the reasons people do become hermits is because they are depressed and anxious. So one just ends up feeding the other. So how do you know if your parent is a hermit, if they're refusing to go out to do things, and you notice that they're staying home more and more and more? Now, it could be for a lot of reasons. Again, it could be because they're depressed and they're anxious. It could be because cognitively they're having difficulty following instructions. Following the conversation. Maybe their attention span is less what it used to be. It could be that physically it's difficult for them to get out. Pain in hips or shoulders, or they have to use an assistive device that they find cumbersome and difficult. Those kinds of things can keep someone from wanting to go out. But either way, whatever the reason is, it's not healthy to stay home all the time by yourselves. So what do? It's very difficult to overcome depression and anxiety. You do need professional intervention. So again, if you suspect that that may be part of it, the only way to know for sure is to get an assessment by a psychologist, a counselor, and it could be a combination of therapy and medication that could help alleviate that. But if it's for many of the other reasons, if they have difficulty getting out, cognitively they can't follow conversations, or physically it's just too difficult, then it may be time to start bringing the party into them, start engaging them in activities, but within their own home or within whatever environment they feel safe. It may be that if they come to your home, that they're fine with that. So invite them there more often. But if they are becoming a hermit, it is a sign that they probably shouldn't be living alone. It might be better for them to be in some place like an assisted living facility where they can engage easier with others, which is, at the end of the day, a lot healthier and leads for a happier life. Number 3, their home is messy or unclean. So if you notice that the house is just not being kept up as well as it could be or as it has been in the past, then the issues could be, again, depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, or physical inabilities. What you do depends on what the issue is. And honestly, it could be a combination of all of those things. So again, I would recommend a professional assessment by a physician to assess any physical difficulties the person may be having. They'll refer them to a physical therapist who can then help them to do the things they used to do easier. Maybe instead of pushing that very heavy vacuum, they can get a lighter vacuum. If it's cognitive, then I would strongly recommend to get a cognitive assessment by a cognitive therapist or an occupational therapist. There's a great test that I used to use years ago called the the Allen Cognitive Levels, that's what it was. And it was a wonderful test that went into great detail on what the patient can cognitively do and not do. It was a great thing to give to the families. They really appreciated it because it went into so much detail and it really helped the family understand what this person was able to do functionally. I mean, a lot of our elderly family members look good to us. They look fine. We think that they can do everything like they used to do. But then when you really sit down and assess them properly and without bias, the things that you find can be surprising. So I do strongly urge you to get them assessed if possible, and to find an occupational therapist who can do the Allen Cognitive Levels if possible. You may have some new tests nowadays. I don't know. But if the house is messy and unclean, that definitely is a sign that they need help. They shouldn't be living alone. So either get help in, or again, moving to an assisted living facility may be the solution for that person. Or someplace smaller, maybe. Maybe even just a smaller home would be enough. Number 4, you see stacks of unopened mail. The same issues as if the home is messy. Could be depression, could be anxiety, could be cognitive issues. If you see stacks of unopened mail, the very first thing I would say is check to make sure that the utilities are being paid. Last thing you want is for the electricity or the gas or whatever to get shut off in your parents' home. So check with that. I would definitely, again, urge you to have the assessment, the cognitive and or psychological assessments with your parents to help them and to help you find out what's happening, what's going on, if there's anything that can help medically, therapeutically in any way. But I think what you can do is, in the meantime, take over the mail. Have that discussion with your parent about helping them through that process. Maybe even do it with them if they don't want you to take that information home. But personally, when it comes to mail, especially bills, we set our mother up on all kinds of auto pay systems. As long as there's, that there's going to be enough funds in the account, the auto pay was amazing because then that was one thing we didn't have to worry about. We knew that her utilities were always going to be paid. Other things she could look at, credit card bills, although we wanted to put those on auto pay, but well, that's another story. Okay, number 5, your parent is missing payments and deadlines. Because they're not checking their mail, they're forgetting about due dates, cognitively they're not able to follow, or the depression and anxiety is simply so overwhelming for them that they just don't care anymore. Okay, so again, what can you do about it? Auto pay is very important, especially for utilities, anything important like that, insurance. I personally think credit card payments should be on auto pay. Anything that you find that is vital, if you can put that on auto pay, that would help a lot. As far as for deadlines of events, I would strongly recommend to use either the Alexa calendar or some other form of calendar that is very evident and easy for that person to use. But it has to be something that they're already using. Introducing a new activity for seniors can sometimes not work very well, especially if there's a cognitive issue. Number 6, they're losing weight. If you notice that your elderly mom or dad or both, or well, it would be just one, are losing weight, then that could be due to a lot of factors: physical illness, depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, loss of taste, and problems with swallowing. So some of those issues, like problems with swallowing, a physical illness, those need to be assessed by a physician. So that's very important. If you notice that your parent is coughing every time they drink some liquid, that may be an indication of a swallowing problem. It may be very minor, but if it's not treated, it can definitely get worse. So check that out. And then for issues such as depression, anxiety, or cognitive decline, then you want to have that person assessed by a trained psychologist, cognitive therapist, occupational therapist, just to see what's going on, what's happening. I had treated, when I was an occupational therapist, I treated many patients that simply their cognition was so poor, their dementia and or Alzheimer's, they had absolutely no awareness of needing to eat. So if that is happening, you need to know that. The loss of taste. I know my mother always ate very, very healthy, and she limited her salt and sugar, and she was very good at taking care of her health, nutritionally wise. Is that a phrase? Anyway, in her last year, she couldn't taste things. They didn't taste the same anymore. And so she ended up having to put more spices, more things. And she lost interest in food for a while simply because it didn't taste good to her. And she actually ended up eating more sweets. The sweet items she could taste and she appreciated. So, I mean, we let her. Why not? There was, she wasn't eating only sweets. But if you notice that in your senior parent, that may be a sign that, well, not the taste issue, but the other signs, if they're losing weight due to physical illness or cognition, then that definitely is a sign that they shouldn't be living alone and they need help, either someone moving in or them moving into an assisted living type of facility. But you can't always get your parents to eat. I just want you to know that. Don't force them necessarily to eat. Speak with your physician about that issue. You need to know what's causing the not eating, but definitely don't fight with them. Otherwise, you'll be fighting with them like you would with a 2-year-old who won't eat his broccoli. The argument is almost the same. All right, your parent is neglecting their hygiene. This is actually a very common issue, especially when you have a cognitive decline such as dementia or Alzheimer's. It's very, very common. If that is the case, that is a very good indication that your parent should not be living alone. So what do? Again, you need an assessment by an occupational therapist. The Allen Cognitive Level Test is a good test, but again, nowadays there may be some other amazing tests that the therapists are using. A psychological examination would also not necessarily be needed, but it wouldn't hurt if you already are getting an assessment for any other issue. But it may also be that they're having problems physically, getting into the shower, using the shower, or using any of the other tools that you need to bathe and shower yourself. If that is the case, then it may just simply be the matter of getting some assistive devices to help them to do those tasks again. Again, an occupational therapist can help you through that. They can assess their ADLs, activities of daily living, to see what they can and cannot do, and give you an indication of why they are not doing it. But if they're not able to physically care for themselves, be it because of a physical issue or because of a cognitive issue, there's a strong indication that your parents should not be living alone at that point. Number 8, they're getting lost when they go to familiar places. This is also another indication of a cognitive decline. It could be very mild. I myself have no sense of direction whatsoever, never have. I get lost going anywhere. But to familiar places, I'm okay for the moment. We'll see what happens. But if you find that your parent is continuously getting lost going to familiar places like the grocery store or the drugstore or even to your home, then something has gone awry. Again, they need an assessment by a cognitive therapist, a psychologist, an occupational therapist to assess their cognitive level of what they can do. If it's at the beginning stages, a GPS tool may be all that they need, as long as they know how to use it. That's the other issue. But if they can use it, then that's a wonderful tool to help them get around. I know it's just about the only way I can get around is my handy dandy Google Maps. Thank God for Google Maps. But a cognitive assessment is definitely needed in this case. Your parent may fight you on this. Most people do because they don't want to admit or know that that's happening. But you can use a social worker to help you, or even a psychologist to help you having that discussion with your parent if it comes to that. Okay, number 9, they miss or miscalculate their medication. My mother didn't take medication until the very last year of her life, and she was very proud of that fact. She lived into her late 80s without having to take any medicine. But then when she needed to start taking medications, she found it very difficult. It just wasn't part of her normal routine. And never mind the fact that she didn't like taking them anyway. But it happens to all of us that we forget to take a pill every now and then. That's fine. But, if you have multiple medications that you have to take throughout the day, that can be very difficult to remember for anyone. So either you have a chart right there by your medications or wherever you need them to remind you. The trouble with that is that you need to be there in front of that chart to remember, for it to remind you to take that medication. So I like to use tools like the smartwatches or Amazon's Alexa to remind you. You can set up the reminder skill there to let you know, hey, John, it's time for your 2 p.m. medication. Those are the things that you can do to help. Of course, having an aide in the home would help with that as well. But the trouble with that is if they're having trouble with miscalculating how much medication to take. I remember one time when I was taking care of my mother, she took the wrong medication. She took the evening medication instead of the morning medication. And she went into a little bit of a frenzy because of that. I assured her it was fine. It was just one time. But that was the beginning of her decline in being able to manage the medications herself. So we knew at that point we had to start taking it over. All right, number 10, the last one. They become very defensive and paranoid. This happens with more people than you think. I saw a friend's father of mine who was 96 years old, a very smart, bright, sharp human being. He became very defensive and slightly paranoid. He started delving into all kinds of conspiracy theories and, collecting newspaper clippings that the government is doing this and this group is doing that. And that, at 96 years old, it was sad to see him go into it, but he would argue them very intelligently because he was so bright. But still, I could see from my training that was not normal. The family just took it as he was being argumentative and getting into this conversation, but from an outside perspective, I could see that he was becoming defensive and paranoid. And that is simply just a sign of cognitive decline, which can make it not safe for someone to be living alone. So that's why I even mention this. So what can you do about that? First, I want to say I'm sorry if your parent is going through that. I know that can be very, very difficult to deal with. The best advice that I can give you is to know that their outbursts, when they become defensive, is not directed at you. It's not personal. Make sure to step away on a regular basis yourself. Spend every day a few hours away, because it can emotionally drain you to be with someone who is continuously being defensive, argumentative, that kind of thing. Keep your voice calm, stay calm, just listen to them. You can engage in the conversation, but don't get wrapped up in the paranoia that they're in. Just remain calm. Redirect the conversation to something else if you can, and get help. Again, a psychological intervention or even by a social worker can help you learn how to speak to someone with this kind of condition. Well, I hope these 10 tips helped. I know it was kind of a long video, but there's a lot to talk about when you're thinking about talking to your elderly parents about their safety and their well-being if they are living alone. I know it can be difficult for both parties, not just your parents, but the caregivers as well. All right, if you like this video, check the like button below. Subscribe to our channel. We've got new videos coming out all the time. Next week, we're going to be talking about setting up a calendar and the reminders on Alexa for all those wonderful things that it can do for you. Take care. Bye.